Well, hey there, new Xcode users. What you're looking at is the Storyteller's iOS Starter Kit 2. And actually, even if you're not a new Xcode user, you'll probably be interested in what you'll want to do is when you first get a hold of the kit. And that's mostly going to involve creating a new scene and a new property list entry for that particular scene, or really what we should start referring to them as pages, because, well, I assume that you're going to be making a interactive app or book, and the theme here is that they're storybooks, although this could just be a compilation of different mini games. It doesn't really have to be a storybook. Okay, so let's go and create a new scene file, and that's where we're going to lay out all of our objects that we're going to interact with. And obviously you're looking at one that's included with the kit, but let's go over here to a new file, and then we're going to pick on, go under resource, sprite kit scene. That's that .sks file type right there, and you can just leave it at my scene if you want. And now what it's going to do is it's going to by default be at the iPad size, so it's going to be 1024 by 768. If you wanted, you could create a separate layout file just for the phone, in which case what you're going to want to do is keep the same exact base name right here and then call it my scene capital P phone. Okay, and there's actually a note right down here about doing that, and when you do, what you're going to want to do is set the size to that of the iPhone, which, if my memory is right, 736 by 414. And dimension wise, what we're doing is we're using the iPhone plus 6 size, but it's going to get kind of scaled down for all the other devices. So just put in there, plug in there the iPhone size, and then if we were using this for the phone, which we're not, we've got now a layout area for, with the proper dimensions for the iPhone. But you'll notice that in the kit so far, I don't actually have any duplicate scenes that are intended only for the phone, because I've been able to work with having specific cameras for the iPhone, which can focus in on different areas of a particular scene, different scaling, and there's other properties that make it so that you can probably get away with just using one single scene file for both devices, which is really, really convenient, because then you're not kind of doing the same thing twice in terms of laying out stuff. So let's lay out something. Let's take a color sprite out of here. I'm just going to drop it into the scene. And by the way, if this whole panel is missing for you, you can always go and toggle it on over there. And then what you're going to probably want to be in is the object library, so this little tab. And now let's just put any old texture in here. So I'm going to put in here cloud, and then I'm going to give it a name. Usually I try to name things similar to what I've named the texture. I just think it's a little bit easier. And then if I want to be able to interact with this with the properties, most likely you're going to need to go over here and put in here custom class of element. So all of these little things are just elements. Okay, element. Just remember that when it's really 3 steps when you're creating a sprite on here. Give it a texture, give it a name, and then give it a custom class of element. And technically what that does is it becomes a subclass of element over here, and then we refer to it by its name when we're referring to it in the property list. So that's kind of its identifier. Now, if you don't know how to import in assets to Xcode, you can see I've obviously imported in a bunch of them, which when you're kind of cleaning out the kit, I've made it nice and easy. You could just delete out this entire folder of stuff, in which case, these pages aren't going to be demoable anymore. But on your end, I kind of assume that you're going to have, the demo version of the kit and then your own, which you can just kind of duplicate from this one. And again, you can just dump this. Dump all of these guys out of here. You're going to want to leave in the cover.sks file, because the kit always launches with that cover right there. And then you'll probably want to just create your own, or import your own assets to probably the assets.xc catalog over here, or just the assets catalog. And that's as simple as just dragging in images from your desktop or wherever inside of here. What I would recommend doing first, though, is be sure that they have the name of @2x.png. And what happens then is they get put into the Retina display slot over here, which is a lot more convenient than them dropping into the 1x slot, which we no longer have to worry about anymore because, well, we don't really live in a non-Retina iOS device universe, do we? There's a little caveat to that. I believe, actually, the original iPad mini does still take 1x images. So yeah, I guess if you want to support them, you've got to still put in some 1x images, but I'm just going to be worrying about 2x for right now. And I don't usually put in 3x images. I don't notice a huge difference on my phone, so I'm just kind of being lazy about that. Okay, so once you've done that, then you can work with those images in your scene, lay them out however you want, and kind of construct your book that way. Now, if you want to just kind of tinker around a little bit, some super fun properties are playing around with making them physics-based. So you could put in here, and I usually go with alpha mask, which actually defines the physics body using the actual transparency of the PNG file, and you can see that little blue outline around it. If I zoom in, maybe you can get a better sense of it. But yeah, that's the actual physics body right there. And you can do some pretty cool things like set it to dynamic, which makes it actually part of the physics simulation. If you toggle this off, it's essentially just going to be like a wall that has a physics body. Allows rotation, means that it can actually rotate. Affected by gravity, that's an obvious one. It's actually going to be affected by gravity. And then let's actually just pan down here a little bit. I'll show you guys some of the other objects that you can pull in here. You could play with the light. So for example, there's really just one big property to consider for right now, the lighting mask. So if you want this to actually be affected by that light, you need to go over here and scroll down and set that to 1. Okay. So for whatever mask this has over here, lighting mask 1, you're going to want to set those objects to have the same setting. You can see move it around now. It's got that cool little light effect. You can even make it so that this casts a shadow. Sometimes this moves down when I move up over here. So for example, shadow cast 1. So now look at that. How cool is that? It's actually casting a shadow based on moving around that light. I'm going to take that off though. And then we've got emitters over here, which you can drag into the scene, and you can set a particle texture for the emitter, and then you're going to want these most likely to be non-zero values to start actually emitting things. And I've made it really easy for you guys to be able to use some of the standard emitters that Xcode comes with. So for example, you've got this fire emitter over here. If you wanted this to be that fire emitter, all you actually have to do is put in here fire. Okay, and then from there, what you can do is actually adjust some of these zero properties, and they'll end up overriding the defaults inside of here. So for example, if I wanted this to just be like 10, then it's only going to emit 10 particles, but it's still going to use the setup for that fire over there. But I'll set that back to 0, and then we've got our labels, so you can drag in here your label, move that over here. There's all sorts of fun properties in the kit for making these kind of more dynamic than they are, so you don't actually have to put in here. This could just be dummy text, and then the property list is going to set in the actual the text for that, and that can be saved values too. So the most simple example is like you could ask the reader to input in their name via the iOS keyboard. It's going to save that value, and then the reader is always going to see their name saved in the book, and you can do that with unlimited labels or values too. And then our camera, so if I wanted to have a specific camera for the iPad, right, give this just a name, any name that you want. Of course, remember it. So that would be my camera for the iPad. And you'll notice in some of these other examples, I have a camera for the phone that I usually call cam phone. And I set the scale of that up to about 1.3 or 1.2, just depending on the scene. And I usually position it right about here or a little bit lower, just again, depending on the content. And that tends to take care of the iPhone. If you can kind of imagine it, notice that this is a bit wider now, and relatively speaking, the the iPhone is wider than it is, than the iPad is taller, I guess, if that makes any sense. So that tends to work out pretty well. And again, this is a property that we can set up in the property list to define a particular camera for a particular device. You can put in audio emitters. You can put in all sorts of physics fields that are going to affect the physics-based objects. And then actions too. And I'll just show you this really quick. This is maybe one of the more exciting things to take a look at. So we've got our cloud right here. And if I want to move this cloud initially when the scene loads up, I can do that with this move action that I just dragged in here. So for example, I might want it to go 100 on the x-axis. I like to ease things out. And now when I don't know. Oh, you know what it is? It's actually simulating the physics, the gravity in there as well. But if that was not in there, let's take that off. There we go. It would be moving off to the right. Here, let's see if I can I'll just take the body off of it for right now. So for example, you can see it's going to move off to the side like that. Now, a really cool thing about, Xcode 7, but also the kit is you can programmably call these actions as well. So I could go over here and create a reference out of it, convert to reference. We can call this move right to. I've already got one in there called move right. Create it, and then so inside of my actions file, you can see I've got, let's scroll down a little bit, I've got move right to, and again, using the property list, I can reference move right to. It's going to know what I'm talking about, and it's going to do that particular action. And you can change this after the fact, so it's a little bit more flexible at times than kind of plugging in your actions right there on the timeline, because this particular action could affect multiple instances or nodes in the scene. And what's neat is it actually ends up showing up in your object panel down here. So for example, if I'm back over here in my scene, I could get rid of this and drag that. Well, it already was a reference, but if I had, I could put this on my SK light node as well, so the light would actually move. You can see it's now moving with it over there, and then I could go back and I could change move right to, maybe I want to shorten the duration or something like that. Save it out, and it should be adjusted. Well, okay, maybe it's not always gonna be perfect, but so there you go. Actually, what you can do is you can override the duration of these as well. So just keep that in mind. So you could drag out one of these, and you can also loop these as well. So for example, I could just click right here, and I could loop the whole thing. In which case, it's gonna be doing something a little weird. You can see it's going to just keep going off and off and off and off to the right, because the loop doesn't include it going back in that particular case. It's just always moving it, 100 points to the right. So it's going to keep doing that again and again and again. I think you get the idea, and there's all sorts of actions inside of here that you can use: resize, rotate, fading in, fading out, all that good stuff. And actions are, again, even used for things like sound in the kit. So you could basically create a action file just for your sound. So for example, I could go over here and say new file and sprite kit action, and we could call this how about action sounds, right? And then inside of here, I'd create, let's say, like cow. And then let's find sound, play sound file. And then you're going to pick out the sound file. I don't actually have a cow sound in here, but there you go. That's what this would look like. And then, all I'd have to do is, again, in the property list, is reference, run action cow. Okay. And that's it. It's going to know to play that sound at that point. Okay, so let's go and switch over here to the property list, and we'll talk about setting up a potential my scene page, right? One big thing though before you head here is be sure that you have downloaded the iBook documentation or the PDF for the kit, because it's like a written version of what I'm telling you right now, but also too it describes all of the particular properties that you can use in the kit, many of which I've also included down here in the examples dictionary, which basically has no effect on the kit at all, or the code, I should say. These are just examples. They're harmless, so you can, if you've done something over here that you like, copy and paste it in here. That's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. And all right, so let's go, and you can see that I've got pages for cover, gumball, color me, puzzle rocks. This correspond to the scenes that I've already got inside of here. There'll probably be more at the time you get a hold of the kit. Let's go and we'll just take our cover, for example, and we'll just paste the entire dictionary defining the cover page, and we'll just rename this to my scene. So this is going to have to match exactly the scene that you've got over here. Now keep in mind, if you do end up having a myscenephone.sks file, 99% of the time you can get away with all the same properties inside of just this one dictionary. You don't have to create a myscenephone dictionary, okay? But with that said, you could, okay? So if you wanted to do that, it's a lot of the same work twice, but and again, I don't think it's going to be necessary. I don't even think it's usually necessary to put it into two scene files. So anyway, we've got my scene in here. I just duplicated it. So for right now, let's get rid of everything but our settings and our elements, okay? And if I remember right, all I had in there was a cloud. Okay, so we'll just trim this down to only having a cloud, and our settings, which we probably have too many in here that we don't even need to worry about. It has physics boundary, probably don't need to do that. Flush save values, don't worry about that. I won't go through all these. You can set the gravity in here. I do have in here the initial camera and the initial camera for the phone. Those are two good settings because we did put in there a cam pad and cam phone. And then that's a follow camera, don't need to worry about that. And then a lot of this just sets the transition properties that are going to be used for going to the next page, whether or not you want to have a particular background sound inside of, or actually, I'm sorry, these are actually setting the sound volume, whether or not it's going to loop. -1 means it loops infinitely. And then whether or not the background sound continues onto the next page. This was a big property that people wanted in the original Storyteller's kit. And then the same thing is true for the narration. So if you had this set to yes, that means that the background sound file is not going to be stopped when you go to the next page. So you could have a music clip or something like that running, and it's going to keep going. And then show physics just is a yes or no value to actually show the physics that are running inside of the kit. Obviously, you would never want to send an app to Apple with your show physics properties still set to yes. Okay, so let's take a look at our cloud. And if you unfold this, now keep in mind that the cloud relates directly to the name of it over here. Okay, so if I decided, hey, I'm going to change this to cloud 2, well, that means that over here I'm going to need to change that to cloud 2. Otherwise, the kit has no idea what I'm talking about. It's harmless if you put in here entries that it can't find, but you just don't need to do it, okay? And then a touch event in here, I could actually, this has got an impulse vector on here that is moving around. This is, of course, we copied this from the cover page, moving around star small, okay? But I could actually, put an impulse vector on myself, on the cloud itself, and it would move that cloud around. It's I mean, don't worry about these properties right now, but well, here one fun one would be actually to go and move it to the right. Okay, so we can, when we touch down on this, the run action is going to be to move right, and this is going to get applied to this particular cloud right here, and we might as well give that a shot. And I actually forgot that one thing I should do before publishing that is make it so that our cover page can really just jump real fast to our scene. And what I've done is a lot of times when I'm testing, instead of like going ahead and just making a menu to get there, what I'll do is I'll put inside of events, which get run right away on a particular page. I'll just open a new page. So you can see under events, I put in here open page, my scene. And then when we run this, it's going to jump right to the scene that we were playing around with. And there we go. And I also, by the way, got rid of the actions that were like running on this already. So when I click down, you can see that the cloud is going to move. Da, da, da. How cool is that? It moves into its little light zone there, which is a little bit hot, a little dark over there, but that's okay. And that's kind of how things work, right? Did magic not happen there? We were able to really easily move something around based on a touch. And the neat thing about these actions are that you can actually animate with actions as well, which is something I guess we'll talk about in another video because this one's getting a little bit long. But and then you can also have actions that are based on preferences. And one of the main reasons we have that is so that you can basically change the animated textures based on the user's preferences. So you could specify that the character you want to be is a boy lizard instead of a girl lizard. And so any of the animations of that lizard are going to be based on a particular preference, essentially. And those are things that we'll talk about in some of the more advanced videos. But let me begin kind of folding things up and getting this whole scene back to getting it cleaned out. I don't want to leave that in there. Well, crashed on me, so that's one way to clean it. The fun of dealing with a beta. And by the way, if like you just saw right there, if you're ever cleaning stuff out of this, send everything to the trash. You don't need to hold on to it as only a reference. Just go ahead and throw it right into the trash. And then I'm going to fold this up. Well, one of the things that I guess we didn't really talk about was importing in sounds. You can just drop them from your desktop or whatever right into the sound group. And if it's going to be a short sound effect, .caf is a great format. There's a cool little program called Sound Converter that's available in the App Store that converts any sounds to .caf. And then for longer sounds, Apple prefers that you go with this .mp3 file. And then texture atlases. This is going to be something that we talk about in another video. Code, that's where you really don't even need to be messing around with unless you're proficient with code and you want to just see what's going on. And then your launch screen, there's a couple notes in here about this, but there is a launch screen image which you are welcome to change. Please don't actually put that logo on there. But unless it's a great app and you want, I don't know, maybe you want to share some of the proceeds from it. But you can change this to whatever you want by going over here to your image at launch and then finding the particular image through here that you want to change that to. And these days, Apple doesn't want you to go and put launch images in your assets catalog. There's a little note about that inside of this RTF file, and then if you want to put in here any custom fonts, you can do that. Of course, if you're telling a story and you want to have your own cool fonts, that makes sense, right? So grab your .ttf files, drag them into here. There's also a little note inside of this that talks about just being sure you check off those options, which is really always true when you're bringing things in. You want to have that add to targets in there. That's a big one. And then inside of the info.property list, which is right here, just be sure that you specify whatever font name it is. So for example, if I was going to do this BM Germer over here, then fonts provided by application, I want to just put in bmgermer.ttf, and then any other fonts, you're just going to want to add a little plus sign right there. And that is about as simple as I can make it in terms of working with the property list. But there's plenty more videos that have actually already been recorded and that are coming that will show you guys the fine area points. So remember, you can get the kit at CartoonSmart.com, and you can email me anytime if you got questions.